Right now, in 2026, the United States military is heavily engaged in one of the most stressful and strategically vital missions on the planet. The U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet is actively patrolling a tiny, fragile stretch of water located directly between the hostile coastline of Iran and the Sultanate of Oman. This is the Strait of Hormuz. For the global economy, this is the most critical maritime artery on Earth. Every single day, nearly 20% of the entire world's oil supply is forced to pass through this exact geographical choke point. But as tensions explode across the Middle East, the world is being violently reminded of just how terrifyingly fragile this global energy lifeline really is. We are seeing a region where a single miscalculation, a single seized tanker, or a single rogue missile could instantly ignite a wider, catastrophic conflict. The threat is so severe that shipping companies are quietly drawing up desperate contingency plans, and insurance premiums for oil tankers are surging to unprecedented heights, which raises a fascinating multi-trillion-dollar geographic question. If this narrow strait is so dangerous, and if the United States Navy is spending billions of dollars just to keep it open, what if ships didn't have to pass through the Strait of Hormuz at all? For decades, military strategists and ambitious engineers have discussed a truly radical geographical hack, building a massive artificial canal cutting straight through the mountains of Oman's Musandam Peninsula, allowing the global economy to bypass the Iranian threat entirely. Welcome back to US Geography. Today, we are looking at the ultimate engineering pipe dream of the 21st century. We are going to explore the sheer geographical violence required to carve a shipping lane through a mountain range, why the global economy is permanently addicted to a 2-mile wide corridor, and why the map dictates that humanity cannot simply dig its way out of a geopolitical nightmare. To understand why the idea of a mega canal even exists, you first have to understand the terrifying mathematics of the Persian Gulf. This specific geographical basin is home to some of the absolute largest and most lucrative oil producers on Earth. We are talking about the energy titans, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Almost every single supertanker leaving the ports of these wealthy nations must pass through one single, unavoidable exit door. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil physically move through this specific maritime corridor every single day. That is approximately 1/5 of total global oil consumption. There are very few places on the face of the earth that carry this level of concentrated economic importance. And here is why this matters directly to the United States in 2026. Even though America produces a massive amount of its own domestic oil, the global energy market is entirely interconnected. The strait isn't officially closed right now, but the mere possibility that it could be disrupted is enough to send global energy markets into an absolute panic. And that panic doesn't just stay contained on the trading floors of Wall Street. A disruption here wouldn't just be a distant geopolitical crisis, it would instantly translate into crippling higher fuel prices, skyrocketing transportation costs, and vastly more expensive goods on store shelves felt by everyday consumers from New York to Tokyo. When the Persian Gulf sneezes, the American economy catches a violent cold. The sheer volume of oil moving through this region is staggering, but the geography it has to squeeze through is what causes the panic. At its narrowest, the Strait of Hormuz is only 21 miles wide. Because they control the entire northern coastline of this strait, they possess the terrifying ability to blockade it with naval mines, fast attack boats, and anti-ship missiles. But 21 miles is just the total distance from shore to shore. The actual navigable shipping lanes that the massive oil tankers use are terrifyingly smaller. Due to the shallow, jagged topography of the seabed, the safe transit corridors are just 2 miles wide in each direction, separated by a tiny 2-mile buffer zone. Imagine taking 20% of the world's energy supply and forcing it down a 2-mile wide hallway while heavily armed warships patrol the edges. It is an absolute geographical pressure cooker. In recent years, this exact strait has been the stage for seized commercial tankers, heavily damaged cargo ships, and direct, highly dangerous military confrontations. This dependency makes global engineers and American military commanders incredibly uncomfortable because choke points naturally concentrate risk, and few choke points on Earth are as sensitive or as targeted as this one. Because relying entirely on a 2-mile wide corridor is strategic insanity, some nations have desperately tried to reduce their geographical dependence on the Strait of Hormuz. They realize that if you can't sail the oil out, you have to pump it out. Saudi Arabia, recognizing the severe vulnerability of its eastern coastline, spent billions building massive overland pipelines that move crude oil completely across the barren Arabian Peninsula, delivering it safely to shipping ports on the Red Sea. The United Arab Emirates executed a similar geographic bypass, building a pipeline that connects its deep inland oil fields directly to the port of Hajar, which sits safely on the Gulf of Oman, completely outside the Strait of Hormuz. But these overland routes are merely geopolitical band-aids. Or, even when operating at absolute maximum capacity, these combined pipelines can only carry a small fraction of the total oil that normally travels by sea. They simply do not possess the infrastructure to replace the sheer volume of thousands of supertankers. For the vast majority of the world's energy supply, ships remain absolutely essential, and because ships are essential, the global economy remains violently tethered to this narrow gateway. This is where the radical idea of geographic redesign comes into play. If you look at a flat map of the region, your eyes are immediately drawn to the northern tip of Oman. This is a highly rugged, isolated piece of land called the Musandam Peninsula. It stretches violently outward into the Strait of Hormuz like a jagged mountain fortress, creating the very choke point that causes so much global anxiety. But here is the most interesting part for ambitious engineers. In several specific places along this peninsula, the total physical distance between the waters of the Persian Gulf and the safe, open waters of the Gulf of Oman is surprisingly short. We are talking about only a few dozen miles of solid land separating the two bodies of water. This geographical quirk raises an incredibly obvious, tantalizing idea. Why not just dig a massive canal straight through the peninsula? If you slice through that narrow strip of land, ships leaving the Persian Gulf could bypass the Strait of Hormuz entirely. Instead of navigating a narrow, highly militarized geopolitical choke point under the watchful eyes of Iranian missile batteries, tankers could simply sail down an artificial trench directly into the safety of the open ocean. On a flat, two-dimensional map, cutting a canal through the Musandam Peninsula looks like a brilliant, simple, elegant solution, but physical geography is never flat, and the terrain here tells a horrifyingly different story. The Musandam Peninsula is not a flat, sandy desert that can easily be scooped away with a fleet of excavators. It is a dominant part of the Hajar Mountains, which is widely considered one of the most rugged, unforgiving, and violent landscapes in the entire Middle East. This is not soft earth, these are sharp, highly compacted limestone peaks that rise dramatically and vertically straight out of the coastline. Some of the mountains sitting directly in the path of this hypothetical canal climb to elevations of more than 2,000 meters above sea level. That is more than 6,500 feet of solid ancient rock. Building a navigable canal here wouldn't mean dredging a shallow trench through the sand. It would mean physically cutting, blasting, and carving a trench through the absolute heart of an entire mountain range. It would be the geographical equivalent of trying to dig a sea-level shipping lane straight through the Rocky Mountains. Furthermore, the canal would have to be unimaginably enormous. We are not trying to float small regional ferries through this mountain range. We are trying to accommodate modern oil tankers known as Very Large Crude Carriers, or VLCCs. These vessels are among the absolute largest moving objects ever built by human hands, often stretching over 330 meters long and carrying millions of barrels of heavy crude oil. To accommodate these leviathans safely, the canal would need to be incredibly deep, massively wide, and structurally stable enough to ensure that a 6,500-foot mountain doesn't accidentally collapse onto a ship. The sheer scale of the excavation required would be globally staggering. Millions upon millions of tons of solid rock would need to be systematically blasted, cut, hauled out, and disposed of. Entire mountain ridges would have to be violently reshaped by human engineering. The environmental impact alone would be catastrophic, utterly destroying the local ecosystems. And then there is the cost. Estimates suggest that attempting to carve a super canal through the Hajar Mountains would cost possibly hundreds of billions of dollars. To put that astronomical number into perspective, the massive, highly complex expansion of the Panama Canal, which only had to deal with a fraction of the elevation, cost around $5 billion. A Musandam Canal would dwarf that price tag many times over, potentially becoming the single most expensive infrastructure project in human history. But let us assume that the United States, the Gulf nations, and global investors somehow pulled together $1 trillion and invented the technology to effortlessly slice through limestone mountains. Engineering is only half the challenge. The moment the technical challenges are theoretically solved, an impenetrable geopolitical obstacle immediately appears: politics. The Musandam Peninsula represents the sovereign territory of the Sultanate of Oman, and as of today, in 2026, the Omani government has absolutely no official plan and virtually no desire to build a canal here. Oman's highly calculated development strategy for this specific beautiful region focuses entirely on ecotourism, local ports, and regional infrastructure. They have zero interest in permanently carving a highly militarized, globally contested shipping corridor straight through their pristine mountains. A mega project of this scale would require extraordinary, nearly impossible international cooperation. Regional governments would need to universally support it. Global investors would need to confidently finance it. And most importantly, the United States military and its allies would need to provide ironclad, long-term security guarantees to protect it from sabotage. And that brings us to the final, most uncomfortable truth of this entire geographical fantasy. Even if the canal was built, it would not actually eliminate the world's vulnerability. It would simply pick up the geopolitical choke point and move it a few dozen miles to the south. Instead of relying on the natural Strait of Hormuz, the entire flow of global oil would now depend entirely on a single, highly restrictive artificial canal. And as the world learned during the Suez Canal crisis, any artificial waterway can easily be blocked. A single grounded supertanker, a perfectly timed cyber attack on the canal locks, a targeted drone strike, or even a natural seismic disaster could shut the entire route down overnight. The global economy wouldn't be solving the problem, it would simply be trading one hyper-vulnerable bottleneck for another. So if the Musandam Canal is so geographically difficult, so financially ruinous, and so politically impossible, why does the idea keep coming back year after year? Because it reveals something much deeper about how the modern world works. Total global trade is permanently enslaved by geography. A narrow canal in Egypt, a tiny strait between rival nations in the Persian Gulf. There are only a handful of vital shipping corridors that quietly, desperately keep the global economy moving. For centuries, these natural geographical choke points have aggressively shaped the ultimate flow of energy, goods, and military power across the planet. The Musandam Canal represents the ultimate human dream, a way to forcefully redesign geography itself, to flex our engineering muscles and permanently remove one of the world's most fragile bottlenecks. But reality is stubborn. Mountains are incredibly difficult to move, and global politics is even harder. For now and for the foreseeable future, the Strait of Hormuz remains exactly what it has always been, one of the most important and most terrifyingly vulnerable energy corridors on Earth. And as long as the United States and the world depend on it, the radical idea of a canal through Musandam will continue to capture the imagination of engineers, military strategists, and anyone wondering just how fragile our global trade system really is. Thank you for watching US Geography. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the limits of human engineering and the power of the map, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what geographical choke point we should analyze next. I'll see you again next week.